Bloody Beaumont, as it's affectionately referred to, is a federal correctional institution located in an unincorporated area of Jefferson County, Texas. It opened its doors in 1998 and has since gained a reputation for violence and viciousness. The incidents that we're going to be talking about today revolve around a white supremacist prison gang developed in the mid to late 1990s, known as the SAC, or the Soldiers of Aryan Culture. The SAC, since its inception, similar to FCI Beaumont, has also gained a violent and vicious reputation and will take things to an absolute extreme over the smallest violation of gang rules or the smallest sign of disrespect. Leo Johns, on June 9, 2014, at around 9 a.m. in FCI Beaumont, felt the wrath of the gang that he was actually a soldier and member of. The murder of Leo Johns showed what happens when you are warned multiple times by your leaders and fellow soldiers in the Soldiers of Aryan Culture, and what happens when you absolutely misbehave, refuse to follow rules, and think you can do whatever you want.
Major federal takedown of white supremacist gangs in Utah, with charges filed today against nearly 24 suspects. News specialist Lad Egan has seen the federal indictments and is joining us live with the very latest on this. Lad?
Ashley, well, this afternoon, prosecutors announcing these drug and weapons charges against 21 documented white supremacist gang members and associates. The U.S. Attorney for Utah saying, unfortunately, that some of these gangs are homegrown and that it's not something our state should be proud of.
Soldiers of Aryan Culture started in the 1990s in the Utah State Prison at the point of the mountain. Since then, it has grown in influence and pervasiveness to where now it is in prison systems throughout the United States. Very unfortunate export of Utah.
In addition to the Soldiers of Aryan Culture that started in Utah, this coordinated investigation also went after 2 other white supremacist gangs, Silent Aryan Warriors and Noble Elect Thugs. 11 of the 21 defendants were just arrested on Wednesday. The rest were already in custody. They face federal charges in methamphetamine and firearms trafficking cases in the Salt Lake and Ogden areas.
This case demonstrates their potential for violence and their willingness to provide narcotics and dangerous weapons to the streets of all the cities across the Wasatch Front.
This large coordinated investigation started back in June of 2019. Since that time, investigators say they purchased more than 1.5 pounds of meth and recovered 15 guns. Initial court appearances for these defendants are planned in the coming weeks on these new federal charges. And the U.S. Attorney's Office saying that many of these suspects have a lengthy criminal history here in Utah, and because of that, they are seeking enhanced penalties on some of these cases. But Ashley, prosecutors calling this a very significant crackdown in Utah this week.
Yeah, significant crackdown, and so surprising to have those Utah ties with those types of gangs here in our state. All right, Lad Egan live for us this evening with that report.
You see the graffiti in your community, and nowhere, it seems, is immune. But what kind of gangs do we have in Utah? And what are police doing to protect you from them? Only on 4, we sent ABC4's Kimberly Houck out with the Metro Gang Unit. And Kimberly, what did you learn?
Well, I learned anytime you see markings like these, you are standing in an area where a gang member has marked their territory. And you can tell by their graffiti what gang you're dealing with and what they're about.
We're from the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
See all this in around here. You gotta stick together.
Is that the neighborhood where everybody wears blue and black?
Yeah,
that
blue
same
and
neighborhood?
Blue and black.
For some in Salt Lake City, they start very young wanting to be in a gang. These officers hit the streets from downtown to Sandy nightly as the Metro Gang Unit, and they allowed us to ride along to see for ourselves how there are 3 ways one can become a gang member. Some are born in, others will be jumped in, as seen in this beating put on YouTube of a gang initiation in Rose Park. Or the 3rd way is to crime in.
They can go target just your normal, run-of-the-mill citizens within the valley.
And officers say a very common way to crime in is the home invasion, where any family can become a target. In March, a home invasion in Ogden led to a 12-year-old girl being choked. earlier that month, 2 more violent home invasions happened in both West Valley City and South Salt Lake.
Property crime, stealing is huge. A lot of our stolen cars here in the valley are tied to gang members. You're seeing a lot of the white supremacist gangs here in Utah that are responsible for a large majority of the check frauds, counterfeiting, and your paper crimes.
And they are all tied to this: red, blue, black, green, and orange. Big boxy letters and scribbles.
It's a tagging feud going on because they're crossing each other off.
Detective Jake Burton shows us the long row of graffiti marking one wall along a Trax train stop in South Salt Lake. It's the same kind of markings on a wall right outside of a home where one informant is being used to purchase drugs from a known gang member.
That's crystal methamphetamine right there.
Selling drugs is how the gangs make their money. And finding those willing to do the selling is what takes gangs into the schools, where they look for young recruits, those kids who seem out of place and are looking for acceptance.
I'm not ashamed. No? Think I would do this if I was ashamed? Hell no.
Do you think your mother would be proud of you?
My mother? Come on now, don't bring my mother up to this.
Several officers surround this young group sitting in front of an apartment complex in Midvale. They flash their La Primera gang signs for the camera.
Symbols of friendship, symbols of careness.
This group of 14 to 17-year-olds are already planning their first tattoos.
Why there?
Because it looks like a cool spot to tattoo.
They will one day be the very markings
Step out of the car, man.
cops will use
Put your legs. Father.
to identify known gang members. This man goes by the name Oscar and the nickname Spooky. The Inked on 13 says he belongs to the Serenos gang that began in LA. The TMC is an acronym telling police he's a member of the gang's breakoff known as the Magician's Crew.
Everybody's scared of me. I don't want them to be scared of me. I just want respect, you know?
Oscar says he's made his way to Salt Lake City from Los Angeles in search of a quieter life.
I got tired of getting shot at and being chased. And
How many times have you been shot at, man?
I lost count.
Really?
Yeah.
He's like so many others roaming Utah's streets. There are 50 documented gangs in Utah with approximately 3,000 members.
A lot of your gangs are started in the prison, as this one did, and they segregate in the prison for power or for protection.
And once they're released, it is up to the gang unit to keep an eye on them. During several ride-alongs, we watched as officers work to be proactive, not reactive, looking for any signs of potential trouble and suppressing it before it happens.
Much marijuana.
But the amount is not large enough to warrant an arrest, but it is enough to alert this unit to keep track of Oscar. They will enter him in their database.
Why we have a gang in it is to document them for the court process, to be able to identify them, be able to come in contact with them to say, hey, you know, when they go to court, for the most part, they can be a completely different person in court.
Some trying to conceal a life they're choosing to live. Now, one way that the police are working to keep kids off the streets and out of gangs is through different after-school programs. Now, coming up tomorrow night on ABC4 News at 10, you're going to see how boxing with cops is changing young lives. Reporting live from West Valley City, I'm Kimberly Huck for ABC4 News.
People serving time say a change inside Utah's prison system has led to violent consequences.
KSL investigator Daniela Rivera has been digging into whether the decision was backed by data, as some worry that their loved ones will not survive their sentence.
It was no secret then.
They knew the rivalry between them. They knew.
And it's no secret now.
He was an active gang member. I'm not going to deny that.
Juanita Martinez says her son's gang affiliation cost him his life.
Yeah, that's why he got killed.
But she believes Jeffrey Vigil's death should have been prevented. In March 2016, corrections officials moved him to a different housing area inside the Utah State Prison. According to a lawsuit filed by his family, Jeffrey went to guards twice with concerns that he would not be safe there, outnumbered by rival gang members. Just hours after he was moved, Juanita says her son was stabbed and stomped to death.
My son suffered tremendously.
If Utah Department of Corrections was better managing its gang population, you believe your son would be alive today?
Yes. Definitely.
She says Jeffrey's death at the hands of rival gang members should have served as a warning. That's why she was shocked when she learned about a significant change to how the department manages prison gangs just a few years later. In an August 2019 memo, officials announced the elimination of the AB schedule, which kept two rival gangs apart. The AB schedule was implemented in 2014 after a spike in violence, but officials said it was always supposed to be temporary, and ending segregation would allow more offenders to participate in rehabilitative programs.
I feel like it's like the gladiator days in there. I feel like they're doing it on purpose. They're opening doors, popping doors, letting them go at each other.
We house people directly based on their behavior, not based on their crime.
The Department of Corrections agreed to talk with us about certain approaches to housing gang members, but not about AB.
Why is the department not answering questions about the AB schedule change?
We're not answering questions about the AB because there's pending litigation. There's been a lawsuit that's been filed.
Spencer Turley is the director of prison operations. He says housing decisions are now based on several factors.
We'll take in a bigger picture view than just gang involvement.
Turley also points to this policy, revised in 2020, allowing people who voice safety concerns to be considered for housing changes. According to the department, more than 4,000 safety concerns have been filed and validated since January 1st, 2017.
We'll try and make proactive moves to prevent things from happening.
But Juanita says that proactive approach failed her son, and the KSL investigators found several documented incidents of violence since the AB schedule ended.
As soon as he exited his cell, a rival gang member was standing right at the threshold with a large, heavy, blunt object.
Last October, defense attorney Chris Manberg told a judge the 2019 decision put his client in danger. Joe Perales Jr. was charged for his involvement in a fight that broke out in January 2020.
And his frustration is this, Judge, what was he supposed to do?
Perales claims he was attacked and had no choice but to fight back.
If I hadn't acted as I did, I would have been in a hospital or even dead. Prison can be scary, Your Honor.
Perales escaped serious injuries.
I'm just trying to go home.
What's going on, you guys? Welcome back. Another episode of Green Lit Gang TV. Much love, much appreciation. Thank you guys for checking out the channel. We're going to be talking about the soldiers of Aryan Culture, a very violent and vicious white supremacist prison gang based out of Utah. Now, sometimes they are a forgotten group when you think of groups like the original Aryan Brotherhood, the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. I've even done a couple videos on the Aryan Circle. I did one on the Unforgiven in Florida. But this group right here, these guys have been around since the mid to late 90s. They are not to be messed with, and they have some of the most vicious crimes committed with inside prison walls and out on the streets. Now, the gang was originated with two brothers. You got Tracy Swena, Steve Swena. In one of Tracy Swena's interviews, somebody was able to talk to him, get some information, the background on the brothers. Steve talks about his brother, Tracy, who, and it says two brothers found it, but you can tell Tracy Swena, who goes by Tinman, he's really was the head of this. He was really the head of the snake, the founder of this. So Steve, talking about his brother, said he was influenced to establish a white power group after an Aryan Brotherhood affiliate introduced him to white supremacist literature, their belief systems, and this all kind of took place in the mid to late 90s. And it said prior to that, and growing up, Steve Swena alleges that his brother was a non-racist who was actually once a part of a multiracial street gang and an avid fan of hip-hop music. Excuse me. Now, Tracy Swena became a free man after being wrapped up in a RICO indictment in around 2004-2005. He got out in 2021. Steve, who was wrapped up in that same RICO indictment in 04 and 05, he got picked back up in 2020 on drugs and guns at the federal level. You know, you read through the court document there. I found it online. And when it gets to the bottom and it lists all the names of the people arrested, you see Steve Swena at the very top, and it's drugs and guns along with 20 other guys. So he ended up getting a lot more time, especially with his criminal record. He'll be lucky to be getting out again. So going over the soldiers of Aryan Culture, they operate both inside and outside of prison walls. They are classified as a security threat group. And the soldiers of Aryan Culture officers, quote, outside of prison, stay in contact with those inside correctional facilities and communicate orders by phone. Now, what have we always talked about with these massive prison gangs? The guys on the inside are calling the shots. They call the shots to the guys on the outside. So like I said, you have these officers outside of prison walls. They're out on the streets. They're making sure everything's running smoothly day to day, but they're reporting back to the big dogs behind the bars. All right? Now, what I found was most interesting about this gang, I'm serious, what I found was most interesting, and to a level I respected it, members are not to drink, use drugs, or even gamble. I was like, okay, you have to respect that. Whether white gang, black gang, Hispanic gang, there's a certain level of respect to say, hey, we're going to do this with a clear head. You sometimes hear that. I've heard guys that'll say, sometimes you hear it in music, it's like, man, if it takes you a bunch of pills or a bunch of drugs to go commit a crime, a robbery, a shooting, is that the same level of, intensity? Is that the same being as down, right, as the next guy who can do it bone dry, sober? I don't know. I leave that up to you guys to decide. But anyway, yeah, no drink, no drug, no gambling. The gang is organized, like a lot of other prison gangs, as a paramilitary S-ranking structure consisting of generals, captains, lieutenants, sergeants, and soldiers. The more criminal activity that a member engages in, the more likely they'll advance to a higher rank. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a great place for information. If you guys are interested in any of this stuff, go check that out, man. They give a good breakdown on these. SAC members rose through the ranks by committing violence against Hispanic and black inmates chosen at random. SAC accepts new members by invitation only from a lieutenant or a sergeant, and prospective members are required to complete a 6 to 12-month period of missions. These orders typically call for attacks on other inmates. Once the mission is complete and the member is approved, they receive an SAC tattoo of the group's insignia, which is a swastika interwoven with an iron cross, sometimes accompanied by the initials SAC. There also exist special patches for certain deeds, such as the SS bolts. SAC has grown since its initial founding, making its way across the United States. So, founded in the Utah prison system, that's where the hub of it's at. But like a lot of other major prison gangs, especially like we've talked about in other videos, within the federal system, because guys get scattered. So, you go to the feds, let's say you live in Utah, excuse me, and yeah, maybe you go to a federal prison in Texas, it's just like where our main story is going to be talking about, all right? These guys were SAC members, but they're in Beaumont, all right? That's how inadvertently the government gave rise to a lot of these prison gangs, is they think, well, we're going to get them federally, we're going to give them so many years, they're never going to see the light of day, hardly any good time, major isolation. No. All you're doing, because if you're a state prisoner, if I kill somebody in Montana, right, and I get charged at the state level, guess what? I'm going to a state prison in Montana. Well, if you're doing federal crime, I go rob a bank, I write a federal credit union, I rob a bank, well, now I can go anywhere. I could end up in West Virginia. I could end up in Texas. If I have certain ideologies and beliefs and I'm charismatic and I got people that follow after me, guess what? I'm going to have my gangs now in West Virginia. I'm going to have my gangs now set up in Texas. And I'm from Montana. That's just what happened with these guys in Utah. And really quick, going back to the SS bolts, you might ask, well, what's so special about that? I would equate that to committing a murder. I would say that you're not going to earn those SS bolts, which is Nazi insignia, Nazi, extremism. I would equate that to committing a murder. The SAC Code of Conduct requires its members to attack known sex offenders and informants. Additionally, members are forbidden from cooperating with law enforcement and engaging in misgeneration unless the gang leadership approves of it. Misgeneation. I'll be honest, guys, I did not find out what that meant. If you do know what that means, please comment down below. Going through criminal activities, a number of different rackets, a number of different illicit actions. You could probably guess what they are. Drug production, extortion, violence. Throughout the group's history, there have also been instances of death threats, arms trafficking, courthouse violence, and other crimes, including orchestrated assaults on prison guards. We're going to talk about a couple of their crimes and then get to our main story. So 2002, the Winter Olympics bomb plot. SAC first gained significant notoriety in 2002 when members of the group, and really quick, guess where the 2002 Winter Olympics were at? Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. So members of SAC, along with members of the Silent Aryan Warriors, another white supremacist prison gang, allegedly planned to attack Jewish athletes at the 2002 Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City by using pipe bombs. And bombs and white prison gangs, white power extremists, they kind of go hand in hand. When you hear talk about bombs and stuff like that, you don't really hear it with the Mexican Mafia, Nuestra Familia, the Black Guerrilla family. You hear that with white gangs, white prison gangs. Just a matter of fact. So, and then you have another one, the Scott Biswell standoff. On August 11, 2002, Scott Biswell, a leader of the SAC, engaged in an armed confrontation with law enforcement members that resulted in his death. An arrest warrant had been issued for Biswell following an incident in West Valley City, Utah, where he reportedly threatened 2 women and an infant child with a firearm over a traffic dispute. Biswell, who was out on parole, fled with his girlfriend, Courtney Grimm, also wanted for child endangerments and a separate incident. They fled to what was called the Amenity Inn Motel in Provo, Utah. Executing the warrant, 5 members of the Provo Police SWAT approached his motel room and forcibly entered the premises. Upon entry, Biswell was seen in bed with Grimm, aiming a handgun at the SWAT unit. Biswell was gunned down instantly, and Grimm, believed to be unarmed, was wounded, later dying after being taken to the hospital. And then there was another RICO indictment. Now, this RICO indictment involves what we were just talking about in the beginning, our founders, all right? Tracy Swena, Steve Swena. This is that RICO indictment in the early 2000s. 12 SAC leaders were indicted in 2003 following a law enforcement investigation. The indictment resulted in as long as 20-year sentences in federal prison. Additional lower-ranking members were tried and received prison sentences ranging from 3 to 15 and a half years. And then the last one we're going to talk about for the main one, murder of Gabriel Roan. Now, this was a insane case. I almost did the main story on this. I might have to do another video on it, but while being escorted by prison guards at USP Beaumont, Bloody Beaumont, in 2007, SAC members Mark Isaac Snuff, that was his nickname, Snar, and Edgar Baltazar Garcia were able to free themselves from their restraints and subsequently stab the prison guards escorting them with makeshift knives. Using the keys they took off the guards, the two then ran down the cell block. They opened up the cell door of inmate Gabriel Roan and proceeded to stab him a total of 50 times. In the process, Snar and Garcia were quickly detained by prison personnel wielding chemical agents. While the 2 guards survived the attack, Roan did not. Investigators believe that Roan was murdered because of his apparent escalating, bizarre, and violent behavior. Attorneys for Snar and Garcia claimed that he had repeatedly threatened to kill their clients. Roan had been serving a life sentence for a 1997 armed robbery in Washington, D.C. Snar and Garcia, they get indicted in 2009. They're charged with first-degree murder, and they finally get found guilty. And this was what was crazy. It was just an hour of a deliberation. Both of them were sentenced to death. And looking them up, as of 2020, they're both on their death row at USP Terre Haute awaiting execution. Now, our main story. We're going to be talking about all of these guys were members. One of them was just a soldier, and he ended up getting snuffed out. And this takes place just about 10 years ago in 2014. Lieutenant in the Soldiers of Aryan Culture, Ricky Allen Fackrell, 32 at the time of the crime, from Vernal, Utah. General Christopher Emery Kramer, 34 years old at the time of the crime, from Ogden, Utah. They were each serving time on unrelated violent robberies where firearms were used. They murdered soldier Leo Johns, who was in on felon possession of a firearm. Again, Utah. These guys are in Utah, but they're in FCI Beaumont, like we talked about, which is known as Bloody Beaumont. It's a federal correctional institution in Beaumont, Texas. Now, Leo Johns is killed the morning of June 9, 2014, but the attack had been planned for about 3 months, since about March. Okay? Leo Johns is killed for violating, again, SAC rules. They do not play when it comes to the rules, all right? Now, I'll be honest. When I hear no drugs, no alcohol, no gambling, do I think they all follow it strictly and they're punished? All of them are punished if they don't follow? No, I don't. I think just like in regular workplace environment, regular street life, I think certain rules apply to certain people more so. I think when your gang grows and you've got different sets and different people scattered around the country, again, to each is their own, right? If you're a well-liked, high-ranking member, you might be able to get away with a little drug use. You might be able to get away with a little alcohol use. In the case of Leo Johns, it didn't seem like he was very well-liked. He was violating rules. He was a known drug user, not paying back drug debts to other races. And in prison, let's say you owe money to the blacks for a drug debt. Well, they're going to approach the leaders, who in this case were Fackrell and Kramer, and say, hey, your boy, who's just a low-level soldier, he's not paying. It makes you guys look bad. It makes those SAC members in that Beaumont prison look bad, look weak, like you can't even control your own people. And that's how you wind up getting killed. And it really does happen just like that. So anyway, he gets killed for buying SAC rules. Multiple times he had been warned. All right, and that's something to remember. Not saying Leo Johns deserved what happened to him, but he had been warned multiple times, okay? He'd stolen from a cellmate, drug debts with other races, and would not follow rules, and disobeyed a direct order from Fackrell. Within Beaumont, the group of guys involved in this, including Leo Johns, all lived in Housing Unit DA. The morning of June 9th, 2014, Leo was making Pruno. For those of you that don't know, Pruno is prison alcohol. You make it with fruits, bread, and other fermentable ingredients. They usually will double bag it, and somebody that you nominate to kind of do it, right, or the guy that's going to volunteer to do it and says, hey, you know what, I'm pretty good at making it. I like drinking it. You got to usually charge everybody a cup, or if it's a gang, everybody might get hooked up and everybody contribute, and you get drunk. It's got the same effects of alcohol. All right. So he's making it. And I have a feeling Leo Johns was intoxicated. I have a feeling that Leo Johns was under the influence of drugs and alcohol while this attack happened. So he is approached by Fackrell and Kramer. They proceed to stab him with homemade shanks. They're called like bone crushers, more than 70 times. And it was said that he was heard begging for his life and was trying to tell them, okay, that's enough. Okay, that's enough. Which is a little hard hearing that for somebody that, obviously sounds like Leo Johns made every wrong decision you could, especially being a member of a gang. Still, though, it's hard hearing those things being said because it's like, still, I don't believe that somebody deserves that kind of a death. Now, there was a lookout. The guy's name was Michael Shelton. He was 40 years old. He was a member of the gang. Because it said that a guard was walking back and forth, right, checking on the cells, and nobody saw anything happen. All right, so after they get done stabbing him, they walk away. Leo Johns is not dead. He actually manages to crawl, and he gets to the cell door, and he pushes it open. Kramer looks back, sees this, goes back into the cell, and proceeds to stomp Leo Johns' head until he stops moving, and they then push him under a bunk bed. And he's not discovered for another 2 hours. Now, from there, Kramer and Fackrell claim self-defense, try to point to a stab wound Kramer does on his elbow. It was actually like they were accidentally stabbed each other. That's how vicious this attack was. They wrap up Michael Shelton in it because he kept watch. And according to the information presented in court beginning in March of 14, Kramer and Fackrell, inmates of the USP Beaumont, conspired to murder fellow inmate Leo Johns. That's just all goes back to breaking rules, guys. Now, interestingly enough, they get charged. All right? They get charged as being this white supremacy group, Soldiers of Aryan Culture. I read through, like, the appeal that these guys were putting out. All right? Fackrell argued that he and Kramer only agreed to assault Johns. Johns had been drinking and gambling in violation of SAC rules, and Kramer determined that he needed to be punished. Fackrell says that him and Kramer took shanks into Johns' cell and stabbed him, but Fackrell argues that he stabbed Johns but left the cell before he died, and that Kramer, quote, finished Johns off. At trial, Fackrell's defense was that he neither intended to kill nor killed Johns. Instead, Fackrell argued that he was present while Kramer killed Johns, that Kramer ordered him to participate in the assault, and that they only planned to, quote, touch up Johns a little bit. God, and I'm not laughing, but it's like, man, you get the biggest, the baddest dudes. These guys are high-ranking members in this violent, vicious prison gang. But, man, it's funny. When you're facing life, when you're facing the death penalty, look how fast they'll turn on each other. And obviously the jury rejects that. They find him guilty of first-degree murder. Now, interestingly enough, both guys, Fackrell and Kramer, they had a joint trial. They did not want a joint trial. Neither man wanted that. And there's a motion that you file, and it's a move to, it's called, quote, sever. And that means to separate the trials with separate jurors, all of it, right? Well, it doesn't happen. They end up all getting convicted. And then on June 13th, 2018, Ricky Fackrell and Christopher Kramer are each sentenced to death. And they are both on death row. And I put pictures up of, where they're at, Terre Haute, Indiana. There's some good documentaries made about that place, Terre Haute, Indiana. If you guys ever want to check that out, just YouTube documentary, Terre Haute, Indiana. And, it's really interesting. They were both convicted by a federal jury of murder in the first degree, and they were actually convicted, excuse me, on May 9th. All right, so they got indicted. The murder happens 2014. They get indicted by a federal grand jury on March 3rd, 2016 for murder and conspiracy to commit murder. And then fast forward, now this is 2018. They get sentenced, okay? They get sentenced June 13th, 2018 to death. And they had actually been convicted back on May 9th of 2018 following a 6-day trial before U.S. District Court Judge Marcia Crone. So it just gives you an idea. And it only took 8 hours of deliberation. Remember, it's a joint trial. So the jury convicted these guys and then sentenced them to death after only 8 hours of deliberation. So it was pretty cut and dry, man. You can't hide that. There's good pictures up, there's good evidence up, and it's like, you guys are booked, man. And of course, they're career criminals. Fackrell has several previous convictions, including convictions for aggravated assault, robbery, and possession of a prohibited object. His prison record denotes several instances of misconduct, including fights and property damage. He was also charged with the murder of a second inmate 3 months after John's death. Yes. He killed a second inmate after Leo Johns' murder. As to Johns' murder, Fackrell argued that he and Kramer only agreed to assault Johns. And it's like, oh my God, dude. When you read that again, it's like, are you kidding me? And then he tries to blame Kramer. And it's like, in that point, it's like, you're so far already in. And, at least you're looked at as a solid guy and a high-ranking member in your gang. And you're going to have respect. But when you flip on this guy, it's like, I just feel like you're going to lose. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. He tries to say, this guy that ranks higher than me, he says he needs to be punished. Well, hey, man, I just thought we were going to go in there with these knives, and we just thought we were going to stab him to kind of touch him up a little bit. Said they ended up stabbing him over 70 times. And then, during the penalty phase, what they do during the penalty phase, for those that don't know, they take these guys that are, like I said, the baddest dudes in the prison system, and if you're his defense team, you got to try to make the jury understand why they are where they are in life and why they just got convicted of murder, why they committed this brutal, vicious murder inside the prison system. So they're called mitigating circumstances, mitigating evidence. And a lot of times they're going to center on the childhood, which is what they did for Fackrell. His father was an alcoholic, and his mother was often working to support the family. They frequently moved around. Fackrell was bullied and abused by his father and brothers. He began drinking, using drugs, committing crimes with his family, and between the young ages of 10 and 14. Fackrell's other mitigating evidence centered on his mental health diagnosis, his ability to be reformed in structured environments. He's been to the biggest of the baddest places, like that of USP Florence 8 ADX. Okay, that's Colorado. That's where El Chapo's at. A maximum security prison in Florence, Colorado. Fackrell was sent to ADX to await trial for Johns' murder. And it said that some individual jurors had found Fackrell had proven some mitigating factors. They said, nah, we're still sentencing you to death. Kramer, on the other hand, who was Fackrell's co-defendant in trial and sentencing, he has prior convictions for bank robbery, use of a firearm in relation to a crime of violence. He also has committed several instances of prison misconduct, including assaults on other inmates. At trial, Kramer's defense to Johns' murder was that he only intended to assault Johns and did not intend to kill him. He argued that his previous visits to Johns' cell on the day of his murder indicated that he lacked the intent to kill Johns. The jury rejected that argument and convicted him of first-degree murder. At sentencing, Kramer's mitigating evidence focused on his dysfunctional childhood and his ability to be safely housed at ADX. Kramer had a difficult upbringing. His mother was a prostitute and a drug addict. His father was a pimp and a drug dealer. His family moved frequently and slept in cars and parks due to his parents' absence. Kramer had to care for his younger siblings. He stole food to feed them and was, quote, was the siblings' hero. So, yeah, I mean, I don't discount that stuff as to why, if you're 10 to 14 and your brothers and father are drinking and doing drugs and they get you to do that, that is so effed up. All right. And seeing Kramer, his mom's a prostitute, his dad's a pimp. So, odds are his mom and dad are probably using drugs together and his dad was probably pimping out his mom. All right. So, yeah, that would completely mess you up as a child. I get then leading to drug use. I get then leading to crimes. I get even robbing a bank, getting into fights, assaulting people. But You lose me when you brutally and viciously murder somebody who at the very worst disobeyed an order. Yes, I get you can't do that when you're in some of these prison gangs, but at that point you have crossed a threshold that there is literally no coming back from. Now you're in a whole different, a very rarefied air. Some people say rarefied air that if you're a career criminal you want to get to, but now you're going to be put to death. Now you're going to be put down. I hate to say it, but you're going to be put down like a dog. You know, you treated somebody else like a dog. You wanted to play God. You wanted to take somebody's life. Well, now the government's going to come back and hit you 10 times harder. The third co-conspirator was actually, he wasn't charged until January 5th, 2021 to accessory after the fact. It was a 40-year-old federal inmate, and his name was Michael Jason Shelton of Henniger, Alabama. He pled guilty on July 13th, 2020 to accessory after the fact and was sentenced to 180 months in federal prison. So I'm sorry, I said that wrong. He was charged in 2020, and he ends up getting sentenced to the 180 months about a year or so later. So they ended up getting all of them. But when you see that, really quick, we'll finish with this, you know, Michael Jason Shelton, he's from Alabama, but he's doing times with these guys from Utah. He's from Alabama. These guys are from Utah. They're in a federal prison in Texas, but they're all part of the soldiers of Aryan culture. That's what I'm saying. That's what happens in the federal prison system. And it was they didn't mean to do it, but they ended up putting these guys all together. And they spread these gangs and these prison gangs. They spread their influence around. So anyway, soldiers of Aryan culture, very crazy, very interesting gang. I'm sure we're going to hear more stories about these guys as time goes on. I'll be here to cover it. Much love, much appreciation. Stay safe out there, guys. Till next time, you already know what it is. Peace!